Um, so today with us is Shin Kitaoka, is ST4 Radiology Registrar based in Southend. Shin is currently on the NHS Fellowship in Clinical AI and works at the intersection of and AI implementation, bringing frontline experience of integration of AI tools into NHS workflows and training. Please welcome Shin, everyone. Hi, Shin.
Hello, thanks for the kind introduction. My name's Shin. I'm a ST4 radiology registrar in Southend, as you said. Um, so today I'm doing my talk on AI in radiology. So is it hype? Is it hope, or is it just simply a headache for radiologists? So one of the reasons I decided to do this talk is because when I was applying for radiology, it was just one kind of sticking point where uh, it was one of the things that kind of weighed heavily on my mind in terms of whether I should go into radiology or not. So hopefully I can convince you that it's something that shouldn't put you off applying to radiology. Uh, so just to start off, if everyone can just hop on and use your phones and just fill out this quick pre-talk survey. It's just to kind of give me an idea of what the audience is like and whether you're interested in applying to radiology, and it will help just tune my talk in terms of how much time I spend on certain sections. All right, so okay, quite a few people saying that it's a hope. One person saying it's hype, and half of you saying it could be a headache. So let's see. Okay, so we've got a mix here. A few radiology trainees, and okay, so quite a lot of you, a nice range of different subspecialties, and okay, quite a few interested in applying for radiology. Okay, so I'll spend a bit of time talking about what you can do to prepare for your interview and so on. And okay, that's good. So a lot of people saying AI is not really going to put you off radiology, which is good. Some that are maybe more put off than others, but nothing on the higher end of the scale, which is good. Okay, all right. Just back to the presentation. Okay, all right. So just starting with my learning objectives. So I'll just start by going through why AI matters in radiology and whether AI will replace radiologists and whether it should affect whether you apply to radiology. And then I'll go over the overview of the current radiology AI landscape. So what kind of AI products exist and what's currently being used in the UK. And then I'll briefly touch on the limitations and the risks of AI. And if time allows at the end, then I'll quickly touch on the NHS Fellowship in Clinical AI, which is what I'm currently doing part-time. Okay, so just to start off, some key terminology. So some radiology related IT terms and some AI terms. Okay. Um, So you might have come across some of these things like PACS, CIS, RIS, DICOM. So what are they? So CIS is your clinical information system. It kind of it collects, stores, and it organizes the clinical data. So there'll be your bloods, your ward round notes, that kind of thing. So Cerner and Epic are some examples of clinical information systems. And the counterpoint to that in radiology is the radiology information system. So things like CRIS, Soliton, and they're very much the systems that radiologists and radiology departments use to do things like schedule scans, store the report, and it's what we use for vetting and so on. Then you've got PACS, which is your system for viewing medical imaging, so X-ray, CTs, MRIs, so a PACS viewer, so Insight and Sectra are some examples of that. And then you've got this concept of a DICOM, which is it's short for digital imaging and communications in medicine, but in effect what a DICOM is a type of internationally standardized file type for all imaging. And this is partially why AI is so big in radiology, is that there's this international standard for imaging. So it kind of helps have a consistent file type with which you can store most of your imaging. And it's not just the images themselves within DICOM, it also contains metadata like patient details and any of the scan parameters. Um, Kind of briefly going through, I won't go into too much detail, but the general gist in within AI is that so you've got AI and you've got various subsets of it. So what is artificial intelligence? So it's the use of a digital technology to create systems that are capable of performing tasks that are like commonly thought to require human intelligence. And machine learning is a subset of that, where you use AI algorithms to kind of use to learn from patterns in data instead of just explicit rules. And a subset of machine learning is that of deep learning, which uses neural networks to learn complex patterns. And the big reason there's a lot of AI tools within radiology is this concept of a convolutional neural network, or a CNN or CombNet. These are types of neural networks which are very good at looking at images, breaking them down, and um, uh, they're good for object recognition and so on. And with the current kind of boom in tools like ChatGPT, I just thought I'd put this in here. So ChatGPT and uh, other kind of tools like that are they come under a kind of a cross section between large language models, which look at which learn off of a huge amount of text data, and generative AI, which outputs certain things. So generative AI isn't limited to just text-based outputs like in ChatGPT, although ChatGPT now does have image generation. But Gen AI can be any of your tools like DALI, Claude AI, Google Gemini, which can create new um, a new output from the input data. And then just touching on some other terms that I'll use, so platforms and suites within kind of the AI space. So platforms, they're like the app stores of the AI world. Um, so I searched the Radiology Health AI register, and on there's 25 platforms that come up, and it's kind of the count of AI tools under the platforms. But the gist of it is they're like app stores in that you can put multiple tools on them, and the main reason why they exist is that they claim to provide a single kind of streamlined way of implementing tools to trust, for example. So you can do a lot of the admin work involved in implementing um, tools just at so you can get the platform and then do all the paperwork for that, and it should reduce the amount of paperwork you have to do when you plug and play with different tools and so on. So that's the concept of a platform. And one thing you'll note here is that there's actually quite a few tools that don't have a platform. So it's still very early days in the actual um, uh, the rollout of these tools. So platforms, it's still kind of um, unknown whether or not they're the most useful um, thing or not. But there are a few points I'll bring up later. And then you've got these concept of suites. So these are kind of groups of tools by either the same company or a few partner companies which are sold together as a set. So one example here is AI Docs or ADocs briefcase. So that's 15 separate tools, including partner tools. So there'll be a single tool that looks at aortic dissections only, brain aneurysms only, and they sell you kind of the whole set together. And during my deep dive, there's a few examples like the IB Lab Zoo here, which was one of the examples I came across, which was quite good marketing, I felt, where they've named each of their tools after an animal, and they call it the IB Lab Zoo. And this is in counterpoint to um, JLK here, is a Korean company where all of their tools are named after a couple of letters and numbers. So very difficult to kind of work out what JBS04K actually does versus JBS06K. Okay, and all right, so just moving on to the first part. So why is it that we need AI in radiology? So for those of you interested in applying to radiology, I definitely recommend looking at the Clinical Radiology Workforce Census. It's published every year by the RCR, and it goes through kind of the current challenges faced within radiology when it comes to things like how many people, the shortfall in the workforce and so on. So the general consensus is that there's not enough radiologists. Whilst the number of radiologists is increasing year on year, the shortfall is predicted to continue to grow. And so currently, I think we're short 1,953 radiology consultants compared to what we would need to meet demand given the population size and the amount of scans. Um, and because of the shortfall of radiologists, there's, as well as the increasing imaging demand, there's a longer amount of wait time to get a scan. So this is just looking at the concerns over backlogs and delays, which has been getting bigger. And you'll note here that between 2023 and 2024, there's a few optimistic clinical directors here who are not concerned at all, who now concerned. And one thing with the imaging backlog, there's a big jump here, which is the COVID backlog, most likely. But the fact of the matter is that we're not clearing that backlog, despite kind of despite their over the past few years. So the backlog remains, and we need to get these patients through because they're waiting too long to get a scan. So this question, okay, fine, there's a backlog, people waiting for scan, let's just get more scanners. And here you see they were, they were asked, oh, okay, we'll pay for the scanner, so would you want it? And the answer is half said no, and the other half said, yeah, maybe. But the main issues with this is that, again, you've got a lack of radiologists to report the scans coming out. And importantly, you also have a lack of radiographers who are the skilled workers actually running the scanner. And you've also got this issue with aging hospital and the lack of space for new scanners. So this is where kind of AI might come in. The current excess in reporting is being insourced, but also being outsourced a lot. And the reality is that there's too many scans. And so maybe AI is the hope here and can help clear the backlog. And you'll note here that there's actually 47% that go operate off of goodwill, which I think is kind of typical within the NHS. So there's a lot of places doing, like most places doing outsourcing. And the fact of the matter is that it costs a lot of money. So 216 million on outsourcing alone in 2024. Um, so this is the potential money that you can put towards either more radiologists or potentially radiology AI tools. Um, so you can reduce the amount of outsourcing either by smart triaging or by reducing the amount the radiologist has to report, then it's a huge cost saving. The bit where AI might be a bit of a headache is that the low-hanging fruit at the moment is in image quality and MR sequence improvement types of AI, where it helps the radiographers acquire imaging faster. And as a result, the reality is that it's leading to an increase, AI is leading to an increased workload rather than a decreased workload. And in most cases, it's providing no change. So it's one of the reasons why radiologists need to be kind of heavily involved in this process of AI tool acquisition to make sure we're not being further snowed under by this increase in technology uptake. Okay, so why why should you apply for radiology then if things are just going to get harder and there's not enough people working? Well, the reality is that the trainees are very happy. They're kind of right at the bottom of the burnout tables here, and the attrition once you start radiology training is actually very low. So only 5% leave. Um, so yeah, happy trainees. And you could argue that this whole not enough radiologists flip it on its head, and maybe that's job security. So, what exactly is it that a radiologist does? So, this is what a lot of non radiologists think radiologists do, and that's probably why there's this fear here that AI will replace a radiologist and it will just churn out reports and give it to the clinician, and jobs are good. But the reality is, radiologists do a lot of other things like protocoling scans and justifying radiation exposure when you're vetting scans. And you're also providing MDT opinions. As well as that, you're also doing a lot of hands-on procedures. So ultrasounds, biopsies, interventional radiology, that kind of thing. And that would be very difficult to replace with AI. And also, not to forget the teaching that you do like I'm doing now, but also to other radiology trainees and other members of the hospital. Okay, so moving on to part two. So what does the current AI landscape look like in radiology? So if you look at the number of AI-enabled devices in medical fields, you'll note that about 3/4 is radiology, and cardiology is 10%, and you've got a few other subspecialties aside from that. The reality is that most AI tools are imaging related, and so a lot of this cardiovascular stuff is also the imaging within cardiology. So things like cardiac CT and echo have AI tools, as well as the kind of good old-fashioned ECG line interpreter AIs, which most people would know. But yeah, so radiology has a lot of tools. So when it comes to surveying the current AI landscape, the main problem that I ran into is that it's kind of like a very foggy landscape, very difficult to work out just how many tools there are. And there's two main sources that I looked into. So they're the Health AI Register in for radiology, and that's a register put together by a team in the Netherlands. It's mostly vendor updated, so out of the 273 tools, 237 or 87% were updated by the vendors themselves. So there's kind of an incentive for them to put stuff out there, so people are aware of their tools, which is probably why they have so many entries. On the counterpoint to that, you've got the RCR who started to put together their AI registry, and that relies on individual trusts and AI leads to kind of submit their own data. So there's 169 entries. A lot of them may be duplicates, but I'll go into that. But the reality is that you can kind of see that uh, the actual rollout of these tools is quite small, with only 8 companies and 16 tools captured in terms of what's currently being used. Again, might be an underestimate, but this was the best I could do. Um, okay, so who's making these tools and where? So I had a look through the data and then sorted the tools by the country of manufacture, and you can predictably see that the US is leading the pack. So here on this map, the darker the color, the more tools for that country. And surprisingly, within Europe, France is leading the pack, and then you've got Korea and China as leaders within Asia. And also maybe one um, reason why this is maybe not the best representation of data. Israel is actually fifth on the list, but it's this a tiny dot here. Um, but yeah, the UK is on the list, but kind of lags behind the US and France quite significantly. Okay, so I then looked at when these tools were released or claimed to be released. So on the Health AI Register, there's a line to put when your tool was on the market since, and you can see here that there was a big increase in tools around 2020. Whether or not that was off the back of the COVID pandemic, it's difficult to say, but there's definitely been a massive increase in the number of tools because of the compute provided by the rise of NVIDIA and their graphics cards being very good for AI tool development. And you'll note this blip here just on the left-hand side. There's this one cardiac MRI tool called MetaSuite, which claims that it's now over 30 years old. But as to how much of the functionality was there at the time, it's difficult to unpick. The other thing I just want to note here is this is the 2016 data point here. This is when Jeff Hinton, who you might know, he has a Nobel Prize in his work in computer science, and is known as the godfather of AI. But he rather famously said people should stop training as radiologists now. It's just completely obvious that in 5 years, deep learning is going to do better than radiologists. To which I say maybe he was right given this massive increase, but then again, hey, we're about 9 years on, and there's not much AI currently being usefully used. But yeah, we'll revisit Jeff Hinton later. Okay, so I then looked into kind of what the functions of these radiology AI tools were. So when we talk about functions, so most of these tools, the large majority were in detection. So that's kind of finding a pathology within a scan and then flagging it. Um, if it then does measurements, then quantification is what I class it as. So that's making measurements, taking volumes of certain stuff. And then you've got triage, which is if the tool purports to sort, for example, the urgency of scans based off of what it's detected. And then classification is if there are multiple different diagnoses, it does it sort and classify what it thinks the diagnosis is. Comparison through time. So can it compare how big a lung nodule's got over time? And there's some interesting tools that do things like image manipulation, where they change the image outputs to help the radiologist interpret. And then a few kind of quite niche indications, but importantly, second read and normal reporting being quite useful tools, but I will kind of touch on them later. So The other way I kind of separated and labeled each of the tools I looked through was how many use cases they have. So the way I like to think of this, single multiple, mass multiple, and combined single use cases are, say, if a tool purports to look at just pneumothoraces, so a single pathology, I labeled it as a single um, use case tool. And then you've got combined single, which is if it sticks two single use tools together. So, for example, an example of this would be if it looks at a chest X-ray for ET tube position and pneumothorax. Um, and then you've got multiple. So I kind of liken it to a Swiss Army knife, where it looks at a bunch of different diagnoses, like 15 acute differentials on the chest X-ray. And the main differentiator between that and mass multiple, I drew the line at 50. So if it has less than 50 differentials, then it's a multiple. And if it has more than 50 differentials, then I class it as a mass multiple tool. So that's like a full toolbox. Um, and what I want you to take away from this is that the vast majority of these tools just do one thing, and the actual tools that are close or maybe closer to replacing radiology, like radiology reporting, are the mass multiple ones, and there were only 5 of those, which I will go into more detail later. So I then looked at what applications there were per subspecialty, and you'll see that the majority are within neuro, so that's CT and MR of the head and chest, which are uh, chest CTs as well as chest X-rays. And then the third is MSK, so that's looking at X-rays and CT tools. And then the rest of the subspecialties kind of lag behind slightly. There's quite a lot of mammo tools within breast, and just this small data point down here, multiple, which is this company called Koios, who, not sure why, but they decided to submit onto the AI register their tool, which does both breast and thyroid ultrasound cancer detection. But it's one of those ones that they probably should have split between the two, because that's what most of the other companies were doing. So I'm just going to briefly go through kind of each subspecialty in order of the number of tools, but kind of without spending too much time. So neuro was kind of mainly split between CT and MRI, and the conditions most assessed were acute stroke and dementia, as well as kind of various other acute indications like intracranial hemorrhage. There's only one mass multiple pathology tool, which was Annalise Enterprise CT Brain, and again, the majority were single pathology. So this is kind of a heat map. Again, it's more just to show that within CT, the most common diagnoses that the AI tool looked at were acute stroke and intracranial hemorrhage. And then large vesicular occlusion, that's like a extension of stroke. But yeah, there's just this one outlier here in terms of so this is the number of pathologies that it looks at. And so 130 for Annalise. And then the next best only looks at 6. And sorry, I should have gone through this at the beginning, but yeah, on the top to bottom, you've got the different conditions. These are the different tools across the top. And yeah, just to quickly touch on Annalise, again, it's the one that says it has 130 findings. It's now rebranded to Harrison.ai, but they're a company out of Australia, and this is their full list of different things that they purport to look at CT head. But the main thing to take away with Annalise and why it's so good is that they have very high quality data. So it was trained by over 140 radiologists, and each case was labeled by at least 3 consultants, and they have very big, well-labeled data set, which is what allows them to effectively cover so many findings effectively. Looking at MRI again, different pathologies and then the tools across the top. The majority of MR tools were looking at either dementia, so looking at how much different areas of the brain might be reducing in volume. And then the second most common was multiple sclerosis with 14 different tools looking at that. Um, Moving on to respiratory or chest. So you've got the majority of CT tools looking at lung nodules, so lung cancer, and then a few looking at pulmonary embolus. Um, and the notable mentions from the CT chest category was Riverain Clear Read CT. So, and I'll just go into that in a second. But again, yeah, it's more or less just repeats what I've just said, that lung cancer and PE are the most common indicators looked at by tools. But yeah, the interesting part about this Riverain Clear Read CT is that it doesn't just look at lung nodules and give a volume reading. It can also compare them through time. But the bit I found kind of most interesting was this ability. Just a second. Just yeah, a bit play. So on the left is the unprocessed images, and on the right is the processed images. So it basically suppresses all of the fissures and the blood vessels. So it just leaves the nodules, and you can see how this would really help the radiologist kind of pick up the nodules on the scan. And it's one of the quite unique tools out of the ones that I saw. So I just thought I'd show you that as one of the cool findings within the big pile tools. Chest X-rays. So there's four that look at a lot of pathologies, so 75, 75, 124, and 148. And these were the tools that do that. And so I'll just go through some of them. So this is, again, Riverain's Clear Read X-ray tool. So this is another cool example of what some of their technology does. So uh, this one is bone suppression. So you've got the original X-ray and then the X-ray with the bone suppression, and you can see that there's a nodule up here that you can see much clearer once all the bones have been suppressed away. And then they have a detection algorithm which kind of detects the any lung nodules. Occipit, this one is an interesting tool for the main reason that it's the only one that does autonomous normal reporting. So the these are the kind of workflows that Occipit as a company offer. And it's based off of their two tools, ChestLink, which is the autonomous normal reporting, and Chest Eye Quality, which is kind of a quality control, and it picks up on any missed findings in your report. If the radiologist misses something, it will flag it. So this is the initial workflow that they offer, which is just detecting findings, and that uh, so both normals and abnormal things the radiologist has to look at. So only is a small time saving. But then you've got their chest link added, which was automatically generated normal report, which the radiologist looks at, and any abnormals the radiologist just reports normally. And then you've got the same workflow with the addition of chest eye quality as a safety net here. So anything the radiologist misses, it will flag up. So these two save a bit more time than the radiologist having to report everything, even the normals, by auto-generating the normal report. But the biggest cost time savings are in this final workflow here, where it will automatically generate a normal report with the high confidence normals, and then authorize that as a final report without a radiologist in the loop. So you can see how this could cut down on what the radiologist has to report on if all the normal high confidence normals are auto-reported. And then it sort of is the safety net for the radiologist reporting the abnormal X-rays. Um, Looking at the other chest X-ray tools, again, Annalise, the same company that do the CT head tool with 130 pathologies, they have a chest X-ray tool that looks at 124 pathologies, and again, massive amount of very well labeled data, which is kind of the secret sauce to making a good AI tool. Um, and this kind of just a few pictures from their promotional material as to what the actual output looks like. Um, and so, for example, this one will trace out the heat map of where the NG tube is and also provides a confidence bar at the bottom as to how confident it is with the findings it's picked up. And again, this is an example of a pneumothorax. And again, this is a massive long list of the different pathologies that it purports to look at. And then Rayscape, if you have a bit of time, Rayscape have a full web demo. So Rayscape chest X-ray, it purports to have 148 pathologies. So it's kind of Rayscape and Annalise are the two chest X-ray tools with the most number of pathologies, and they're both used within the UK. Just briefly moving on to MSK. Um, so it's a mix of X-ray tools looking at fracture detection, predictably, and then there's a few other kind of mundane tasks like pediatric bone aging and measurements for non-acute MSK pathology that that these tools do. And then within CT, it's just very select indications like vertebral compression fractures, C-spine fractures, and rib fracture detection. And then a few unique MRI tools, one of which I'll just go into, which is simulated CT by Bone MRI. Sorry, it's MRI Guidance is the company and Bone MRI is the tool. So this is the Bone MR tool, and this is one of the papers that they looked at the outputs from the AI tool. So what it does is it edits this E1 MRI image into a simulated CT image, and this is CT on the right here. And so you can see that the simulated CT looks very similar to the actual CT, but the advantage of this being you don't need to irradiate the patient, and also because they're having the MR, they don't subsequently need to go have a MRI if you're suspecting ligamentous injury, for example. But it's one of the examples of a quite unique AI tool, and again, these are all claims by the company themselves, but they claim 100% fracture detection. But even in this paper, the results were actually quite good um, in terms of on comparison to a real CT. So it's quite a good tool, but also a interesting example. Cardiac, I won't dwell too long on. It's the majority of them are quantification tools, so looking at quantification of calcium, or like coronary artery stenosis, and doing measurements and the kind of nitty gritty, boring stuff that would otherwise take a lot of time if you were to do it manually. I've bunched the vascular tools together here, but there's a few tools that do AAA detection and aortic dissection detection. And then 20 tools within the abdomen, majority, half of which are prostate cancer tools. And a bunch of tools looking at quantifying fat or iron within the liver, and then a few kind of GI tools. The CT tool is part of that AI doc suite, ADOC suite, looking at free gas for possible perforation. But this MRI tool looking at bowel motility is a bit of a niche one. I spoke to one of the GI radiologists who didn't have who did question how useful it actually was, but yeah, you can see here the main takeaway in the abdomen is that prostate cancer is a low hanging fruit. And then breast, again, this independent second reader tool. This is a AI called Nia by Kieron, but interestingly enough, it's since being added to the register. It's been acquired by Deep Health, and when I kind of looked into it, it looks like they're no longer offering the independent second reader as like an advertising point. So I think this might be one of those cases where they've realized the limitations and the tool's just not quite there. Um, and then image quality, again, these are tools which both improve the quality of the image, but also reduce the scan time. So subtle medical here, their AI tools claiming to produce the same quality or better quality image um, in a fraction of the time. Um, but one thing to note here was that a lot of vendors had have their own AI algorithms that aren't listed on the tools, so maybe highlights a blind spot in the register. And then there's a few other tools in various other areas, notably this cancer MRI tool just stated tumor characterization. So maybe it's a tool that can be used on any tumor, but was a bit difficult to put in a box. But hopefully it gives you an idea of what kind of tools there are out there. So I then looked at the AI registry. So this is the RCR tools that are currently being deployed within the UK. And once you get rid of some of the duplicates, it's actually closer to 122 cases, 8 companies and 16 tools. But one major problem, again, a headache with regards to AI, is that there's a lot of unclear and incomplete data. So looking at these are some of the maps that the RCR AI registry has. So these are all meant to be data points of where AI is maybe being deployed. But again, a question how useful this is. Um, and this is kind of the raw data, and it's kind of the same tools being put on twice. So I took away the duplicates, and this is what you get. But yeah, no, the TLDR summary of the deployment of AI in the UK is that it's 16 tools in total, currently logged, are over 4 subspecialties. And so this is looking at how many users of each tool they were, with the icon size being the total count. And you can see here that this lung nodule AI for CT seems to be the biggest. And then you've got this mass multiple use case chest X-ray reporting aid. This one is Annalise. And then you've got various other pulmonary embolism and CT head reporting aids, and a few for trauma, and 2 for prostate cancer here. But the general consensus around this is that it's probably a bit of an overestimate on numbers here, where, for example, this lung nodule tool was an imaging network level submission, where they'd submitted all the hospitals within their imaging network as using the tool, which is in reality probably a massive overestimate, because not all the sites within a network are able to use the tool. So just looking. So I'm just going to quickly go through some recent headlines. And so there's all these tools, but is it just hype? And is the momentum actually slowing at the minute? You look at this that graph of when AI tools were released. You notice that it's starting to dip here. So I keep talking about low hanging fruit. So maybe this is all the tools that were low hanging fruit, so easy wins that have all been taken, and there's none left, and that's why it's coming down. Um, but also behind this is the fact that legislation is starting to catch up, and regulations are getting harder in terms of releasing new tools. So that will kind of feed into why this is coming down. Um, and just revisiting Jeff Hinton, um, yeah, so he did another interview and this article on the I think New York Times, where he restated his previous prediction and said that maybe he didn't make it clear enough that he was talking purely about image analysis, and that maybe it's the combination of AI and radiologists that is what's going to take over in the future. So he's kind of backpedaled a little on this rather strong um, opinion that we should stop training radiologists. So this seems to be closer to kind of where we're headed as a specialty. The other thing to mention is so this was September of 2025. Bayer, a big pharmaceutical company, they acquired Blackford Analysis a few years ago, which was one of the biggest platforms. But they announced that they're no longer participating in the radiology AI software platform sector. So they've withdrawn all of their money, and Blackford and their platform Bayer Calantic are both no longer operational. And if you look here, these red lines, this top one is Blackford Analysis with 92 tools leading the pack, and Bayer Pharmaceuticals here with 35 tools. So both of these are more or less on the way out or are being pulled as we speak, which kind of leaves the question, well, okay, we've got the next best deep sea, but like what's going to happen to platforms? Is there any money to be made here? And are they able to deliver on all the benefits that they purport to have? And then in terms of AI being possible hype or bubble, you've got the government shelving 1.3 billion UK tech funding and AI plans. Part of this is a government shift. So the Conservatives missed a lot of funding, and then the Labour government came in and said, "Oh, we can't fund that." But it does kind of bring the question as to kind of what's going to happen with AI going forwards. And there's this whole topic on the implementation gap where, well, we've got this many companies and these many tools, but in terms of moving that over to actual implementation in the real world, there's this big gap. And why is that? So that kind of moves me on to kind of what are the current limitations of AI tools within radiology. So first of all, the technology is not quite there. So you've got what the radiologist uses on the day-to-day, which is like your multi-use tools. When you read a chest X-ray, you can't just simply report on the presence or absence of a single thing. And so only 5 of the 273 tools kind of look at the full spectrum of pathologies. Um, so the reality is that the majority of tools are what a radiologist might find useful, but can't replace a radiologist. Um, the other point to make on the fact that whether or not AI is properly there or not is the fact that experience kind of speaks for itself. So there's this, I think it's Oxford looked into the evaluation of the use of an AI tool in uh, assisted reporting of pneumothoraces. So whether or not using an AI tool helps with the sensitivity of picking up pneumothorax on a chest X-ray. And they did note that there was an increase in sensitivity, but when you look at that sensitivity by grade, and here I think middle grade was like 3 to 5 years and senior grade was 5 plus. And so there wasn't actually a significant difference in the middle grade and senior grades in terms of their sensitivity, and the majority of increase was in the junior grades. And the question this kind of brings up is, okay, fine, you can get a junior who's never really looked at X-rays that much to a similar level to middle grade and senior grade, but it also begs the question, well, it's not useful for the majority of clinicians. And the major question that no one's managed to really or really looked into just because AI is in its early days is AI going to prevent these juniors from reaching these levels as a middle grade if you take the AI away? Um, so that's one area that definitely needs looking into. So, yeah. The second limitation is the fact that it's complex. These AI tools, they cost money, but it's not just that. The implementation itself um, is a very complex process. This is one of the papers talking about the implementation cycle. You've got this wheel that looks into like the different things to evaluate, and you've got this from the RCR saying, "Oh, okay, this is how you deploy an AI." The reality is a lot of steps here, a lot of people involved, but whose whose job is it to look at these AIs and whose time's like who's being paid to do it? And the reality is you've got the radiology AI lead, but that's just a radiology consultant who has maybe one PA or half day a week, and that's not enough time. And you've also got this other issue of there's all this like safety, clinical safety cases and all these other things that need to be done. That's the job of the clinical safety officer. But if they're not from the imaging background, they're often not really wanting to get too involved. And so do you need to train a clinical safety officer within radiology? And that's again a lot of time, lots of money to invest, and that's just not there. So there's a lot of roles that aren't clear or are yet to be filled, which is kind of limiting the progression of AI adoption. And also there's this question of whose money it is. So you've got stroke tools, for example. There's one in Southend. The stroke team, they acquired it, they love it, but they didn't let radiology know. And so they're paying for it, but again, there's this question. Well, if it's a stroke imaging tool, should stroke fund it or should radiology fund it? And it's imaging, but whose budget should it come out of? And then this final point on return on investment. If you outsource a lot, then your tool, your AI tool can reduce the amount of outsourcing. Fine, you've proved that it might be cost effective, but otherwise it can be quite difficult. It's just a quality of life improvement for the radiologist. Well, you know that's very difficult to prove a cost benefit. So you might fall into the trap and not be able to proceed from there. And then we move on to the third limitation, which is liability. So this is kind of the clinical risk matrix where you've got the likelihood of a hazard and then the severity of the hazard and the outcome. So like loss of life being catastrophic and yeah, so you you use the clinical risk matrix to look at the risk acceptability. So 5 being unacceptable and 1 being acceptable, no further action required. And stuff in between here, there's a mix of might need a bit of risk control and so on. But this is kind of the formula everything follows. So you've got risk assessment, you identify a risk, you either eliminate it and there's no residual risk, or you reduce it and there's residual risk. Problem with this is that sometimes, well, most of the time, you can't fully reduce all the risks to zero. So you have to pass them on to the end user. And again, this ends up being a massive headache. So our radiologists just being used as a liability sink, where if the AI tool makes a mistake, well, it's in the terms and conditions that it's your fault because you should have checked the imaging, at which point, what's the point in the AI tool? Okay. So in terms of the risks of AI, I will kind of focus on the biases. So a bias being tendency to lean in favor or against something, uh, or something. Um, but I've split these into human factors, AI factors, and population factors. And we'll go through each in order. So first of all, human factors. So first one, automation bias. So this is a tendency to over rely on automated systems. leading to a uncritical acceptance of AI outputs. So this example here, it's not a problem if you've got a normal chest X-ray, AI calls it normal, you've got it normal, that's fine. Abnormal, abnormal, abnormal. This is fine, but it becomes a problem where if the AI gets it wrong, and then you just blindly go, "Oh yeah, it's correct," and there's a discrepancy here, and you've reported it incorrectly. So this is one bias that we need to we need to be aware of as radiologists adopting AI, not to fall into. Algorithm reversion. So this is a flip side of that. So um, there's a few papers that looked into this, but um, this is a tendency to go against the AI. So it's more common in people with existing expertise. So radiology consultants, for example, the AI goes, "Oh, okay, this is a normal X-ray," and then the radiology consultant's like, "Hang on a second, I don't trust this AI stuff," and says, "No, no, it must be abnormal," or same thing with abnormal. Um, this is quite interesting because there was this a paper which looked at using the same kind of outputs, but masking them to make it look like another person was giving the same output, and that led to a increase in acceptance of the advice given, even though that this green person is actually the AI in disguise. Um, so yeah, this one bias to be aware of. Then you've got confirmation bias. So this is accepting automatically the kind of information given based off of your pre-existing intuition of it. So if AI gives you a stack of high confidence normal and you go, "Oh yeah, they're all normal," when there are a few abnormals in there, but because you were told that they were high confidence normals, you let that affect your judgment, and you make the error. Then you've got, so moving on to AI factors. So you've got ones that are algorithm related. So this example here is that of triage bias. So it's where, because of the AI, you're unfairly treating a certain group. So for example, if you've got a triage bot which sorts all these scans based on urgency, flags B and C as urgent, A is a non-urgent case. Day later, it does the same thing. D and E are urgent. Oh, A is still non-urgent, and same on the next day. And so A is very unhappy. They're non-urgent, but they still need a report. But the problem with this kind of triage bias is that, I mean, where previously non-urgent cases were being reported the same as urgent cases, because the bot has decided that it's non-urgent, you unfairly discriminated against that group or that person. And then you've got performance bias, where the AI might work better in a certain subgroup compared to another. And then some of these training data related AI factors, like sampling bias, where the training data isn't representative of target population, or labeling biases, where the human labeling is kind of subjective. This kind of falls into the category of AI training data is very much like you put garbage in, you get garbage out. So you need to make sure that what you're putting in is high quality information. So you think of the Annalise example, high quality in, you get high quality out. But if you put garbage in, you get garbage out. Population factors, again, all of these kind of fall under the various categories of unequal representation. So what you want to avoid is using a tool that will perpetuate existing biases. Um, and yeah, so all of these biases result in poor AI model performance in certain areas or groups because of maybe inequities within the data. So yeah, that kind of concludes my talk. Hopefully, it wasn't too much of a splurge of random data, but I've hopefully covered all of my learning objectives, and kind of gone through various bits as to how AI can be hope. it could be hype, but how there is a bit of a headache involved every step of the way. Okay, so if everyone can just fill out scan this link. It's different to the other one, but the same questions. But I just see whether there's a significant difference, and hopefully, I've convinced you that AI is not going to take our jobs just yet. Okay, so I'm hoping that there's no no's, or are you still interested in applying for radiology? And hopefully I've succeeded in not changing your opinion on that, and hoping this final number um, is trending towards the lower numbers in terms of AI not putting you off there. And it's nice to see that there's been an improvement in the skew towards the left here compared to the pre-talk. Anyway, okay, let's just think. Okay, all right. And okay, so thanks everyone for joining. I think I'm not sure whether you'll be able to add to. I'm not sure if there's a chat, but I do have some extra slides, but I'm just aware that it has been an hour. Um, I can quickly go through what is the NHS Fellowship in Clinical AI if people would be interested, but we'll. Is there a chat where people can say whether they're interested, or should we call it a night?
Thank you, Sheen. That was an amazing presentation. There are some questions in the chat I will
Yep,
ask you to answer, and I also have
sure.
quite interesting question. So first one from Faiza Ali.
Okay.
There are a lot of AI tools on the market, but relatively little uptake of those tools in the UK. Are there any other countries who have a greater usage of AI tools?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the US are quite far. I think the US and Korea are two areas that are quite ahead of the curve. So it's for two separate reasons. I think in the US, because there's a lot more kind of private healthcare and companies running things, they're a lot quicker on the uptake, and they've got a lot more money to throw around to try these tools. So the US is one of them, and then South Korea is interesting because their uh, rules and regulations and a lot of data are a lot more lax than in the UK, which is why their uptake's a lot faster because they have less kind of regulatory hurdles to kind of block that. So they're kind of two countries that are quite ahead of the curve on the uptake.
Okay, interesting. And next question is from Ali Shabastari. If AI could fully automate one part of your workflow, which would you choose?
I think one area that, whilst I
Reporting.
did say was one reason AI wouldn't replace radiologists, it would be vetting, definitely. 'Cause, I don't think anyone truly enjoys having arguments with people, but yeah, it's one area that if AI could replace, I think a lot of radiologists would be right on board.
What about typing?
So I mean, I guess dictation is one area that AI is kind of starting to see some use. But I mean, dictaphones do use kind of very rudimentary forms of AI to kind of detect your voice. Dynamic slides are kind of one area that I think even in GP, there's some tools that are marketed, but the reality is that a lot of them aren't quite at the stage where they've managed to get CE marking to be used officially. So I think within GP, there's one called Heidi, but that's still awaiting kind of regulatory approval because. Mm, so just to briefly explain what a dynamic scribe is, it will take various bits of the conversation and instead of just doing word for word transcriptions, it will put it all in a structured order. So, for example, you could report a scan and just scattergun report as you see things like there's a fracture of the rib and there's a left-sided renal cyst and then it would order it all correctly. But the main problem with that is that it's not quite at the point where it can be trusted not to hallucinate and make stuff up, but create it in such a way that's quite difficult to pick up on the errors. Because if it's presented to you in a typo-free format, you'll tend to accept that it's probably everything you said. But yeah, that's maybe one area that's kind of needs a bit of work, but it's up and coming.
Mhm. And there are a lot of questions of and people asking how they can be involved in AI. And basically that's one of my questions. So we as a doctor, we're expected to have a lot of other skills on top of our daily doctor skills, and definitely AI will be becoming one of the most essential in future. And if someone wants to start learning about AI, where should they begin? Given the volume of information, it's tremendous. And basically, AI for some people is a separate degree. So you can't expect to be on the same
Yeah.
level as someone who taught AI for 4, 5, 8 years. So how we can cover that gap, where we can start, and what
Mm.
we can do as a doctors and
Yeah,
be involved in
so
AI.
that's definitely a it's a fair point, and I think one thing that a lot of people have anxiety around with regards to learning about AI is that they feel they have to be able to code and have to be able to kind of understand the exact ins and outs of how tools work and stuff. And whilst that does help, I think it's important to keep in mind that as a doctor, you've got many, many years of experience within kind of your field. So you will understand the clinical field a lot better than any of these um, data scientists and Komsky people. And so you will want someone who understands how to code on your team, but very much your role as a clinician within the team is not so much to be able to code, but is to be able to maybe understand AI, but also kind of steer the group or um, the people that can code in the direction that will be most useful for you as a clinician. So in terms of practical points around how to get involved in AI, um, if you're a radiology trainee, then the RCR do run a few kind of mixed webinar and so it's a mixed modality e-learning and um, webinar based learning around kind of the basics of AI and AI implementation. So that's something that you can maybe do and get funded. Um, and there are a few other kind of courses available online, but in terms of actually kind of, so this is one area maybe where it might be useful for people if I go through what the NHS Fellowship in Clinical AI does, because it tries to cover a big gap in the current existing space where there's a lot of resources on explaining what AI does and can do, but there's not many resources or or kind of opportunities for actually learning how to implement existing AI tools, which is one area the fellowship kind of focuses on. And also you get funded part-time to kind of be able to be the person to kind of look into how to deploy AI.
Okay, it's interesting. And probably one of the most important questions for junior doctors.
Yep.
What would be your message to doctors who are considering radiology as their specialty, but they are concerned about how AI may affect their field over the next 10 to 20 years? And what would you recommend them?
I think if you're genuinely passionate about a career in radiology, there are ways in which you can kind of future-proof yourself against possible impact of AI, but it's not at a point yet, not in the next 15, 20 years where your job's going to be completely gone. It will definitely change the way we work, but I don't think where the technology is there anywhere near to a point where it will completely replace radiologists. And the fact of the matter is, if you're replacing radiologists with AI, there are a lot of other jobs that are going to be at threat before radiology. So I wouldn't let it put you off. And I think radiology is still a very rewarding career to kind of go into. So I wouldn't let it put you off.
Okay, that's a very interesting presentation. Thank you for your time, Sheen. There are no more questions,
Okay.
so we can. Okay, sorry, there one more question.
Yep.
1 second. I can. No, sorry. Probably was deleted.
Um,
Oh no, it's personal question. Oh,
okay.
there is a question from Aisha.
Yep.
Are any AI tools learning? Sorry, are any AI tools learning from review from radiologist second review? For example, items for lymph nodules that not get data feed. Sorry. Uh, would you say that AI is very limited by the nature of large corps and not to share data? Um, Medtronic has a tool to proposing stents, but will only recommend its own stents rather than the whole market.
So in terms of okay, um, so just
I will send you. I will
yeah,
send you a question.
yeah. If I can read the question, it's a bit of a long one. Okay. One review. Okay. Yeah. So a bit of to answer it in parts. The first bit is asking, are any AI tools learning from reviewing radiologists' second review? I think at the minute, the way the legislation is that any AI tool which is CE marked, um, it kind of has to be. They can't change the algorithm too much, so there's not many that actively learn from what the data that you're putting in is. To some degree, there is some feedback in the sense that you can. Most tools have a feedback system where you can rate the output, and if you disagree with it, you can say you disagree, and then they can go back and then maybe adjust some of the settings to kind of improve the tool in that sense. But it's not learning in the same sense as like for example ChatGPT, like farming your data to kind of uh, um, improve future models. So there's, I think there'd be a bit of a backlash and difficulty in rolling out a tool which was farming data just in the healthcare space because of the sensitivity of the data involved. Um, and then to answer the second part of that question, um, um, would you say AI is very limited by the nature of large reports not to share data? So yes, to kind of partially answer that, a lot of the existing tools are based off of large shared data sets. And one big limitation within AI is that they need to be trained on kind of representative data. And to do that, you need a large data set that's being cleaned. And that's one big limiting factor within the NHS, which is there's not like a single data repository, so the data is kind of trapped in individual bus packs, for example. So it's called being siloed, but like different data sets are individual, and that's one big problem within AI in terms of trying to create an AI which is generalizable, because the data is not generalized. That is a problem. Hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, there are no more questions.
Okay.
Thank you a lot, Shin. It was an
Okay.
amazing presentation, and it's really interesting and covered a lot of questions from junior doctors and trainees who will start working as consultants soon. Thank you for everyone who joined us. If you can submit your feedback form for certificates, which we will send shortly. And that's it for tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.